This should be played at high volume, preferably in a residential area.
You've locked in with the rest. Now lock in with the best. Welcome to Fourth and Frames, where tonight we're going to react to the NFL trade deadline and break down our plays and fades for Week 10. And if you're joining us live on YouTube, we'll be answering your questions as well. And if you're watching with us on YouTube and want to support our content, the best thing you can do is like this video and then subscribe to the Fantasy and Frames YouTube channel, almost 1,500 followers strong. And then try to lock in on our channel anytime a new podcast or short form video drops. Then also search for all of our podcasts here at Fantasy and Frames by name on your preferred podcast platform. For us, that's subscribing to the Fourth and Frames podcast and also locking in at fourthandframes.com for the latest weekly rankings for both redraft and IDP, as well as staff dynasty rankings and all of our latest articles. But Kyle, can't help to notice that you are not wearing your usual headgear tonight. So what I need you to do is explain where you are, and if you have anything you need to say to Giants Nation, Jackson Dart Nation, Ole Miss Rebel Nation, whoever it is, if you feel something you need to come clean about, then just go ahead. The stage is yours. The frame is yours. Go ahead and do that for us, man.
All right. Yeah, I would like to publicly apologize to Jackson Dart himself, to all of his affiliates, and all of his fans and Giant Nation. I am sorry for doubting Jackson Dart in Week 9, where I said there was no chance that he was going to be quarterback 10 or better when he was quarterback 7 this last week. I didn't think he could do it. And who am I to even judge Jackson Dart? You know, like, who am I? I'm just some dude with a bag over his head, sitting in a spare bedroom, talking fantasy football. Who am I to even question Jackson freaking Dart? So I apologize to Jackson Dart. I apologize to all of his fans. I was wrong. I was dead wrong, and I will eat that. But you know what? I don't think it would be right to apologize to him and his friends and all of his nations without showing my face. I don't think that's right. So, yeah, I need to show my face to Jackson Dart and all of his fanhood that this is the person that made an idiot bet that said that Jackson Dart can't throw the ball and can't be quarterback 10 or better, because he was, and I apologize. This is Jackson Dart.
If you can't beat Jackson Dart, then become Jackson Dart.
You know what? Exactly. Exactly. That was the little surprise I had for y'all. I went ahead and did it up. And yeah, Jackson Dart, man, you're the man. And I was wrong about you, sir.
So you're telling me we're not fading Jackson Dart this week?
I'm not fading him for the entire season. And
and
next year
I'll tell you
we'll
what,
revisit it, but no.
The craziest part about this is that you get to sit with this Jackson Dart eye black on your face for the next hour and do an entire show and be immortalized forever on the internet.
Absolutely. I'm down for it.
With your favorite.
Yeah, I had to make it worse. I had to make it worse than just the bag, you know?
Your favorite quarterback and my favorite quarterback, Jackson Dart. Jackson, it's good to have you with us tonight. But Nate.
Yo.
How are you, and how is it to be sitting in the presence of arguably one of the most popular rookies in the NFL this season?
Yeah, it's feels I don't even have the right words for it. It's kind of starstruck a little. I too didn't necessarily think that you're going to be the QB7 last week. I will have to admit. Also didn't think, looking at the box score, that if you said, hey, Jackson Dart's going to throw the ball 33 times and have 191 total yards, that I was going to equate that to the number 7 finish. But he, on a positive note, he got back. We asked this question on Sunday: is will Jackson Dart get back to the rushing upside that helped support, the fantasy finishes that we would need? And he did. He had his first 20-yard rushing game in nearly a month, and he did so with 56 yards and a touchdown. So Jackson, good to see. Are you trying to jump in on that Madison Beer, Justin Herbert relationship a little, or are you slowing down on that? I'm hip to the all the social media stuff, just so you know.
That I think the kids call that the T. Actually, it's from what I understand.
That was that was stuff from back when I was younger. They were calling it the T, and then it went away, kind of like a lot of things do. Like, I don't know any other phrases that I can think of, guys. I'm just dragging this on for no reason whatsoever.
Like bell bottoms and Tamagotchi, it all comes back in the long run, baby.
Yeah.
If you ever need to land the plane, Nate, all you have to do is just say 6'7" and just do your hands like this, and then we can move on. Yeah. I don't know it, but I don't know what it means, but it gets the people going. It's provocative.
It means nothing, actually. It means nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Well, it means I'm blocking this number from people, so they don't know who to call.
We have another celebration of a Bills regular season victory. So
congratulations!
It's just another season.
Ticker tape parade. Get the marching band out.
But meanwhile, in the process, your latest AFC East standings, and guess what? Still second place, Aid. Still second place. That's courtesy of producer extraordinaire Jim Bednar, who just absolutely loves rubbing this in Aiden's nose every single week. What a start to tonight's show. Drew, I mean, were you expecting something like this to come out the gates tonight? Because we have come out swinging with Jackson Dart, 6'7", like it's everywhere.
We're a show for the people. It's what we do, so I wouldn't expect anything less from this crew. But no, one thing that I appreciate us and I appreciate about our show is that we don't take ourselves too seriously. We know that we don't know everything. We're gonna miss shit. We're gonna get things wrong. It's just a part of it, But so I appreciate the fact that Kyle could have fun with it. I said at the end of the show I was rooting for Jackson Dart this week just for this reason, and Kyle did not disappoint by any means. So we'll have to find more ways to work in shit like this on our shows, because it's been quite a bit of fun.
Well, my question is the random people that come in late and they see the eye paint, they're gonna
they're just gonna think you're fired up for fantasy football, man. This guy's ready to go to war over fantasy football.
Is Kyle abused at his house? I don't know.
Can I point one thing out real quick? Is that Aiden was saying, remind us that it was Mahomes' first ever career game under 50% completion rate. And I think the ironic part of the whole thing is it took Mahomes' worst game from a throwing perspective in his NFL career, his multi-MVP career, for the Chiefs to lose by 7 by a touchdown. And so it took the worst game Mahomes could ever have to still only lose by 7. Not sure if that's the badge of honor that you want to have. That comment probably went wide right. So see if you remember that. Yeah. Does that hurt? Yeah. Get over it.
I'm not even a Bills fan.
Oh my goodness.
Hurt me.
Yeah, I know. Feels good. That was good. I'm watching that game on replay.
Oh my God.
I can tell Nate's really loving that too.
Look, I can tell you guys are locked in tonight, so we might as well just take the momentum and get the ball rolling on the Week 10 smash or pass plays, ladies and gentlemen. Because those smash players are players that are outside the top 12 quarterbacks, top 15 running backs, top 20 wide receivers, or top 10 tight ends. In the Fantasy Pros Week 10 expert consensus rankings, and the pass players are players that are inside the top 15 QBs, the top 20 running backs, the top 35 wide receivers, or the top 12 tight ends in that Week 10 ECR. So, Nate, I'm going to go ahead and start with you, because our beloved quarterback friend here Your first smash play is a favorite target of his. A guy who we've talked about all this year, kind of having a little bit of a much, not little, a much different usage pattern than he has in past years. Wandale Robinson having a pretty good season this year. He's had some really high spots. He's had a pretty steady floor. He gets the Chicago Bears this week, and he's still ranked fairly low as the ECR wide receiver, 29. So go ahead and walk us through why you think he's such a smash play this week.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much like you were alluding to. Since Malik Neighbors went out, it's 27% target share. Obviously, the 13 fantasy points per game isn't exactly this smashable number, but what is 22 points, which is what the Bears have allowed to opposing slot receivers. And when you see Rhett, close your ears, when a bum like Chris Olave can put up almost 17 and a half points out of his 30 out of the slot in week 7.
No arguments here, by the way.
I know that. But then you get players like Yoshavas, et cetera, out of the slot that just have productive weeks. The Bears have been, I don't know. I don't want to call it a funnel to fantasy points out of the slot, but that's exactly what it's been. They already really bad against the wide receiver position. And then when you hyper condense it to one specific area, and that's the area that Wandale Robinson's going to excel in. And I'll just ask Jackson right now, hey, you mind helping me out with this smash play so I don't have to go out and look like I was going to say a fool. It's not nice of me. I wasn't going to say that. You look great, by the way. But if you could throw the ball to him, maybe just a little more this week, just help inflate that floor. It's not hard to beat the wide receiver 29, but it wouldn't, it'd be very, very helpful. So thank you, Jackson, and thank you, Wandale, for supporting this pick.
Yeah, and you know what, Nate? I actually wanted to go Wandale Robinson, and I started writing some notes up, and then I started looking, and I was like, oh wait, Nate beat me to it. So I'm all about the it's Jackson Dart. Thanks, Eddie. So I was all for the Wandale Robinson call.
Thank you.
And look, I think, Nate, you brought up a really good point. You mentioned the 13 fantasy points per game, not setting the world on fire. But you know what it does illustrate for me? If you tell me that 9-10 weeks into a season, a guy is averaging 13 fantasy points per game, that's a solid floor guy that's a weekly starter in a flex position at minimum. Which, heading into the season, Wandale was getting drafted around wide receiver 50, close to wide receiver 60. It wasn't a super high ADP. It was super low. You can get him late in most drafts if he was being drafted at all. For him to be returning this sort of value at this point in the season, you've already won Wandale Robinson.
Yeah, which is what's kind of surprised me that his ECR ranking was so low. Is on the season in full point, and I know maybe we do a lot of half point projections and with our smash pass, but still, he's the wide receiver 18 on the season in full point. He's averaging just a shade under 13 on the season as a whole, and that was with Malik Neighbors, in the lineup for the first couple weeks. So it seemed like an easy play, and I'm not one for taking the low road. But then again, I don't like being wrong if I can. So yeah, Wandale should be. I'm going to say wide receiver 16 on the week. That'd be my over under.
And if it was the low road or the easy road, he wouldn't be as low as he is in ECR. So I mean, it's you're definitely going out there, but I think it's a good call.
So Nate giving us Wandale Robinson versus Chicago Bears. It's his first as his smash play for the week. Kyle, you're going to stay at the position. Another guy who has kind of had his moments this year. Troy Franklin, ECR wide receiver 33. He's had some really bright spots. And the thing is that in a Sean Payton offense, there is usually that one guy. We saw it throughout his time with the Saints. I could speak very well to that, whether it was Marcus Colston or Michael Thomas, a big-bodied guy that can make plays. Courtland Sutton fills that role now. But the thing about a Sean Payton offense is that there was always 2 or 3 other guys in that offense that he might rely on. It could be a tight end. Lance Moore had some really solid years with New Orleans Saints. Devery Henderson had some really solid years as well. So usually that second guy, Sean Payton always seems to find one that is a little bit under the radar, a little bit unexpected. Troy Franklin kind of filled that role.
Yeah, and we're going to find out real quick how this ages for me, right? The Raiders, because they play on Thursday night, but the Raiders just lost a heartbreaker on Sunday to the Jacksonville Jaguars in an overtime thriller, which was kind of a surprise, wasn't it? Where they went for 2 back of the end zone to Brock Bowers, couldn't quite come down with it. So they came up short, and now they're on a short week in Denver. I just kind of see them getting railroaded here, honestly. Reality sinking in for the Raiders that they're now 2-6. Playoffs, it's probably not going to happen at this point, right? But what I see with the Broncos offense, with Troy Franklin in particular for this matchup, is he may not be the number one in the offense, but he's actually really close, guys. He actually leads the team in target shares at 19.3%, second in receptions on the team behind Cortland Sutton by just one catch. He's got 37 catches on the year. Sutton's got 38. And Sutton's getting the 23.5% first read share. But again, Troy Franklin is right in the mix there, right there with him at 22.2%. And the Raiders allow the 8th most fantasy points to the wide receiver. So I do think Sutton probably will have a nice game as well. You know, there's some meat on the bone for Troy Franklin in this one at wide receiver 33. I couldn't pass it up.
Yeah, not only do they give up the 8th most fantasy points to receivers, they give up the 4th highest points per game to slot wide receivers, and then his likely matchup against Jeremy Chin as the slot corner for Vegas. Jeremy Chin's giving up an insane 0.36 fantasy points per route run, which is, if you're not familiar on where that lands on the scale, is a very high number to the point to where there's only like 5 or 6 corners that are giving up a higher number. So very, very good matchup for Troy Franklin this week.
Okay, and you mentioned all that. I hear the read, I hear the target share, I hear all this. Nate, my question becomes this. Mm-hmm. Is it possible that GameScript possibly railroads all of this and any upside for Troy Franklin this week?
You know, every time that it feels like I take a week where I go with a particular situation that GameScript is going to dictate, it feels like the old NFL parody wants to step in and completely change that up. And so I'll never completely hedge. Like, picking Troy Franklin for where he's at, I think is kind of a baked in that offense could keep it on the ground and he might not see as many passes, but he's every week. I mean, Troy Franklin is just quietly, I won't say hyper targeted, but enough volume that he's capable of supporting even in the low situations. Like, I would worry more so in like a true slot receiver in a situation like that. Like, I think Troy Franklin will still be on the field regardless. That's the worry. That's the worrisome, is when a player might actually just lose overall snaps as a result. I don't think Troy Franklin is the recipient of that happening potentially. Pat Bryant, if you were really thinking Pat Bryant was going to be something, he would see a significant drop.
And you also have to keep in mind, anytime you make the argument of, well, this game might get out of hand or the game script might not work in the favor of Denver's passing game, for that to be the case, that means that Denver has to score and put up points. And Troy Franklin could very easily be one of the reasons that the game gets out of hand because he's had a good game up to that point. So
yes,
there's something else to keep in mind too.
Yeah. And it's important to add that, you know, it is a division game. You know, I say that I feel like they could get railroaded, but I'm telling you, man, with division games, sometimes you just have to throw these records out the window because they know each other really well. They're built to beat each other, you know. So it's anyone's game.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's a great point. So Wan'Dale Robinson, Troy Franklin, Drew. We might as well keep it in the slot right now and go with down to Indianapolis, who, man, we'll talk about it a little bit later. They're going all in this season. We'll talk about the big trade they made a little bit later. But right now, over the past few weeks, Alec Pierce has emerged quite a bit over the past couple of weeks for the Colts and becoming a real weapon to the point where he's now the ECR wide receiver 32, which had you told me at any point this year that Alec Pierce would be approaching wide receiver 30 territory in the weekly ranking, I'd have called you crazy.
And even crazier, wide receiver 32 isn't high enough. And he might not be a slot guy like some of these guys we've talked about, but look, I've never really been the biggest Alec Pierce believer. I'll be the first one to say it, but we might need to be starting a dialogue. The volume hasn't really ever been his thing, but Pierce has had double-digit targets in 2 out of the last 3 weeks, and he's had at least 5 targets in all but 2 games this season. And I'm not saying that I'm expecting another 10-plus targets this week. 3 out of 4 weeks would be pretty wild, but I am saying it's pretty impressive that he's now slightly ahead of Tyler Warren, and he's second among Colts pass catchers with a almost 19% target share. Look, Pierce is still showing off the big playability that he's known for. He's averaging over 20 yards per reception. He has a 45% air yard share on the season, both easily highest on the Colts. So you don't really need the volume for him to be a viable fantasy asset, but it's been a nice addition to the other parts that he brings to the table. And on the surface, I didn't really love the matchup against Atlanta this week. They've been the 10th toughest matchup for fantasy receivers over the last 5 weeks whenever you look at schedule adjusted fantasy points given up to the position. But friend of the show, someone that I respect a ton, Debro over at Fantasy Pros. He provided some context during one of the shows that I was listening to earlier this week, and put out something on Twitter that we need to pay attention to. Pierce's opponent this week, the Atlanta Falcons, they utilize single high at the highest rate in the NFL, over 73% of the time. And then whenever you look at Alec Pierce against single high, he has a 27.6% target share, 3.69 yards per route run, at a 32.5% first read share. So some very, very strong numbers against single high. So while the matchup might not look ideal on the surface, thanks to Debro and the Fantasy Points data suite, we can see that there's a chance that we get another spike week for Alec Pierce this week. So given his recent usage, the additional context around the matchup with Atlanta at wide receiver 32 in the ECR, as crazy as it might sound, that's not high enough for me. Alec Pierce is a smash play for me this week.
So what you're telling me is, as a betting man, an anytime touchdown for Alex Pierce sounds pretty good for probably 3 or 4x.
Yeah, anytime touchdown's not a bad bet, or maybe like the over on his yardage. With him being a big play guy and not necessarily needing a ton of receptions to hit his yardage, maybe taking the over on his yardage, because that is one thing. If I remember correctly, before I say this, let me see. The one area I believe, if I remember right, that he has struggled is getting in the end zone. Yeah, he hasn't scored a single touchdown yet this year. And so you would definitely be going against the odds if you're going to take his anytime touchdown, but that probably means that the odds are pretty decent. So if you want to do like a wild Pierce parlay and do an anytime TD and the over on his yards.
I've seen him get close. I know he's gotten close. He's gotten tackled down close to the 1 or 2 yard line. So maybe he finds one.
Yep.
And if I'm not mistaken, this week, isn't the over under in terms of total points on this Atlanta Indianapolis game pretty high? It's like 48.5 or something like that.
I haven't looked yet, but it wouldn't surprise me though.
Yeah, so I think it's
40, actually 48.5.
Okay, yeah, so 48.5. So that's a high total, which tells me that Vegas, this is one that's going to be right for fantasy points. So just if you're going to look at it over the big picture for this week, I mean, we know Jonathan Taylor is a player you're starting no matter what. They may not be listed as smash plays, but Drake London, who I mentioned in my Place and Fades article that drops tomorrow on fantasyandframes.com, even Kyle Pitts, these guys who have had some very high target numbers over the past few weeks, it just feels like this is one of those games where if you're a DFS guy, if you are a redraft guy, but you have some Colts and some Falcons, those usual suspects that you might consider in those lineups, those Josh Downs types, those Alec Pierces, those Kyle Pitts, like those guys who might be fringe start sit guys, this might be one of those weeks where you might want to give them a little bit extra consideration, because with that high over under, Vegas tends to not miss on that very often. So
true.
Yeah, I wonder if the Colts are going to throw Sauce out for first matchup against Drake. That's going to be a shadow type scenario, or if they're going to ease him into that defense, because that'll be a very intriguing matchup.
Yeah, honestly, it might be easier to just say, "Hey, go follow Drake London around," instead of, we want you to do,
I know.
the playbook, everything like that. They could just look at him and say, "Wherever Drake's at, that's where we
You're
want you at."
exactly. I mean, it
So
really
it'll be
could.
interesting to see.
I think I read that he was gonna split time on shadowing him with who's the other corner that shadows? There's another one. Is it
They've got Jalen Jones on the out. I think he's healthy now. They got him on the outside across from Sauce, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds
no.
about right.
Now that
Listen,
their secondary is healthy and they added Sauce to it because they got Kenny Moore back healthy as the slot corner too. That secondary is a problem. Like that's the perfect example of having to pay attention to recent trends because early in the season, Indy was the secondary we were picking on for fantasy purposes. You wanted your receivers to play Indianapolis. That's moving forward. That's not going to be the case. So that's those
Mhm.
those are the type of trends that you have to pay attention to.
Absolutely, I agree.
Good stuff. So yeah, those are our smash players for the week. Wandale Robinson, Troy Franklin, Alec Pierce, all at the wide receiver position. Let's get into some pass plays. And Nate, let's get back to you. Brian Thomas Jr., Jacksonville Jaguars. I mean, we've kind of been puzzled by this BTJ usage all year, yet here he is still hanging around that wide receiver 20 spot as the ECR wide receiver 19. But they're playing the Houston Texans this week, which probably means he's drawing a pretty good cornerback in Derek Stingley. So definitely has to play a factor in calling him a pass play this week as the ECR wide receiver 19.
Yeah, it's a combination of things. One, this whole low grade high ankle sprain sounds oxymoronic. I don't believe there's such thing as there is, I'm sure, different grades to that. So I was even concerned with a health factor from the get-go. As you mentioned, Derek Stingley is reason number 2, and that goes all the way throughout the season. Honestly, there's been 2 wide receivers all year that have even remotely scratched the surface of a productive wide receiver week, and that's Puka and JSN. And so I'm sorry, BTJ, just because you have a 3 initial and I can go, Puka doesn't have a 3 initial other than MVP potentially for many fantasy teams without the injury. The JSN Puka comparison doesn't quite fit. Then you throw in Jacoby Myers. I would not be shocked in the least if Trevor Lawrence is absolutely sick of receivers dropping passes and leans heavily on Jacoby Myers and some consistent hands, depending upon just what involvement he has immediately. I have to assume he's going to play heavy. I do love Parker Washington. He again's in a great spot. I see a number of options in the chat for people mentioning Parker Washington, and I think it's a solid play. I don't love Trevor Lawrence necessarily, but I absolutely don't love Brian Thomas Jr. So I'm avoiding Houston anyway. Tack on the ankle injury and just the overall health of him, and it seems like the easiest pass play that I could find on the entire list, to the point where it's not even just a temper expectation. There's plenty of other players I would rather start, even if he wasn't. If he was to play, I still would have a hard time feeling comfortable in my lineup.
You got a list pulled up, Nate, of maybe receivers that you would play over him that's deeper?
Well, I tell you, I've already adjusted my ranking for him, and I moved him so far down just because of the injury, and I don't want to forget about it. But yeah, like for instance, I'll start probably right around like 27. Like I would start Ted McMillan over him. I would start Stephon Diggs. I'm getting into the low 20s. If I go into the 30s, you mentioned Troy Franklin, and that's really close. Like if it was a healthy BTJ, I would probably make the decision of Troy Franklin. Khalil Shakir's there. I would start Shakir over him. Then you start getting into like the Tez Johnson, Parker Washington, Trey Tucker's. And Trey Tucker's probably, if it wasn't Denver, I would say maybe as well. But all of those names, if that doesn't scream just, hey, I'm out, is when I'm having to dig for some of these names that honestly are good flex plays week in and week out, but not ones that you should have to substitute for your first round pick.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. Been rough sledding for BTJ. Kyle, let's move to you. Kamani Vidal, ECR running back 18. Tricky play because Kamani Vidal, since he's come in, has been really solid. He's had some nice spike weeks. But it kind of seems like over these past few weeks, once again, as Drew mentioned, watch the trends. Seems like the Los Angeles Chargers are trending more towards being a passing team right now. I mean, Lad McConkey is knocking on 10 targets every week. Keenan Allen has had a resurgence this year. Miranda Gadsden has had 68 yards minimum every week over the past month. I mean, this is a team that kind of feels like they want to throw the ball right now. Is that kind of factoring into your pass play for Vidal or what?
Yeah, that's very good points, actually, Rhett. I haven't said anything on this show about Vidal yet, but I do think he's getting a little too much hype. He's a fine backup, don't get me wrong. And I'll give him credit for busting out of the gates like he did with those 2 100-yard performances, but one of those games was against Miami, okay, which is the 6th friendliest fantasy points to running backs, okay. But the other one was Minnesota, who is respectable. So I will give him that one. But then he comes to Tennessee, okay? And maybe I'm just pissed off right now, and this is why I wanted to put him on the fades list because they beat us. But besides that, he comes to Tennessee, and he only puts up 30 yards against my Titans. 30 yards is all you're going to muster up? That's
not in our house, baby.
That's the area where we get demolished. Is on the ground, not really in the air as much. So, he musters up 30 yards against us, I believe, on 12 carries.
Without Jeffrey Simmons.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And the Steelers' run defense, who they're facing this week, they've come alive a little bit, guys. In the last 5 games, they have held Jordan Mason to 57 yards, Quinshon Judkins to 36 yards on the ground, and Josh Jacobs to 33 yards. Now, he did score in the game. And full disclosure, Emmanuel Wilson, the backup there, he had 61 yards on the ground himself. But Chase Brown put up 108 yards, so that was another good game that they had. But I will say this, they contained Jonathan Taylor against the Colts, who had just 45 yards. So I don't fully buy Kamani Vidal to beat this ECR ranking of running back 18. When I see the Steelers defense coming alive here in the second half of the season, they're bringing back out that Steeler curtain. And this second half of the season, it's like what Drew mentioned earlier, with the Colts. I think the Steelers are another one that haven't played very well defensively till now, but I do think that they're going to bring out that Steeler curtain and shut down the run game. They're getting better at it.
Yeah, I'll tell you, whenever I jumped into the show sheet a couple hours ago, and I was looking before I'd actually looked at the show sheet, and I was just looking at the matchups and everything. I was looking at some recent trends, and I was like, oh, okay, last 5 weeks, Steelers have been the 3rd toughest matchup for running backs. They've got the Chargers this week. Jarrett Patterson looked better than Vidal last week. I'm grabbing Vidal as my pass, and then I looked at the show sheet and was like, shit, Kyle already has him in there. So obviously, I agree with the call. I think it's a great call. The Steelers recently, they've been a pass funnel defense. You haven't been able to run on them, but receivers have been absolutely feasting on them. So that's how you have been able to beat the Steelers. And whenever you've got a quarterback as good as Justin Herbert, I don't think the Chargers are going to have any issues with just leaning on his arm this week.
And look, I agree with all this, but I think from just a really practical standpoint, a guy like Kamani Vidal, if you look at what these rankings are actually saying, in order for Kamani Vidal to live up to where he's currently being ranked, he has to be one of the 20 best running backs in the NFL this week in order for him to surpass his ranking. This is a guy that was, 6th-round pick?
I have no idea. To be honest with you, I don't even know if he was drafted.
Yeah, it was either I want to say 6th-round pick, but he might have been a DFA. You're asking a guy who heading into the season was a complete afterthought on this roster after Amari and Hampton after Najee freaking Harris. And all of a sudden, off of 2 good games, one of which is one of the worst run defense in the league, as we documented, man, it's just a tall hurdle to cross for a guy who really already is punching above his weight, being a starting running back in the NFL, for being perfectly honest. I don't mean 6th-round pick. Boom. See, smart guy. Right? But he's punching above his weight at this point. This is probably, in all likelihood, and yes, I know there are exceptions like Rico Dowdle who make fools out of us all the time. But there's a very strong chance that this is as good as it gets for Kamani Vidal in his NFL career right now. So I'm not hating on the guy. I'm just looking at it from a very practical, matter-of-fact standpoint and saying that if he continues this pace, then yeah, God bless him. He's going to end up having a spot in this league for a long time. But in all likelihood, he has to be a top 20 guy this week in an offense that is kind of finding more of an identity away from the running game, at least until Lamar and Hampton comes back, which may not be for another 2 or 3 weeks because they're expecting him back maybe after the bye week, which is week 12. I don't know. It's just a lot for me.
Yeah, and we have to you have to keep in mind that being a top 20 fantasy running back isn't necessarily equal to being a top 20 real life NFL running back. Like volume can make up for a lot of inconsistencies, but the reality is whenever he's only getting 3 more carries than Jarrett Patterson last week and he only got 1 target, that's not the kind of volume that is going to be able to get you to that type of fantasy finish, especially against a matchup that's been as difficult as the Steelers. And I mentioned, what's up, Jamie? Appreciate you joining us, man. We talked about our we talked about our smash plays for this week. Now we're going through a couple guys we're passing on. Then we're going to get into some questions in here in the chat, and then we're going to react to the trade deadline to wrap up the show. So hope you can hang out with us. And as Jamie said, if you guys are here with us, make sure to hit that like button. And to those of you that have dropped questions in the chat, we appreciate you guys dropping those questions. We do have them starred, and once we get through these past plays, I've got the last one here. I'm bringing up the rear, and then we're going to jump into some questions. But I mentioned that the Steelers defense has been more of a pass funnel defense lately, and so it only makes sense for me to come and tell you that despite that, I think you should pass on a Chargers receiver playing against the Steelers this week. And that's where I'm at, right? Yeah, of course, naturally, right? So even though Keenan Allen has been an up and down fantasy asset this year, where his value comes from hasn't really been that difficult to figure out. Allen has scored a touchdown in 4 games this season. In those 4 games, he's been the wide receiver 6, wide receiver 9, wide receiver 12, and wide receiver 17. On the flip side of that, Keenan has failed to score a touchdown in 5 games this season. And those 5 games, he's been the wide receiver 43, the wide receiver 48 2 different times, the wide receiver 54, and the wide receiver 55. So he's basically Jamal Williams as a wide receiver. And now it's not rocket science that someone is going to have a better fantasy finish on the weeks that they score a touchdown. But I feel like I needed to bring Keenan up because the matchup does look really enticing this week. So I'm sure plenty of fantasy managers saw Keenan Allen matchup against the Steelers. The Steelers are green or 5 stars or whatever on whatever fantasy app you're playing on. Your fantasy app is telling you Pittsburgh is a great option for receivers. And that they're not completely wrong. The Steelers have been the best matchup for fantasy receivers, numero uno, over the last 5 weeks. They've given up the most schedule adjusted fantasy points to the wide receiver position during that time. However, Keenan Allen, his struggles recently have lined up pretty well with rookie tight end Oronde Gaston's breakout. Gaston's played 75% of the snaps for the first time in week 6. So if we look at pre-Gadsden breakout, post-Gadsden breakout, Keenan Allen had an almost 75% route percentage and a team-high 23% target share the first 5 weeks of the season. And he also scored 3 of his 4 touchdowns the first 3 weeks of the season. Now, if you look at weeks 6 through 9, once Gaston started playing a good amount of snaps, those numbers have dropped to a 62% route percentage and a 21% target share. And with Ladd obviously being a slot guy, Gaston lining up in that same area, Keenan Allen also, whenever he is on the field, is lining up out wide more often, with his percentage of snaps in the slot dropping about 10% since week 6 compared to where he was the first 5 weeks of the season. And as good of a matchup as the Steelers have been for fantasy receivers, they're more middle of the pack when it comes to receiving touchdowns given up to the wide receiver position per game, which is obviously less than ideal for a player whose fantasy value has been so heavily tied to if he gets into the end zone or not. And now that he is lining up out wide more often, that also means he should see a decent amount of Joey Porter, who's only given up 0.18 fantasy points per route run, which is tied for the ninth lowest among defensive backs. And so I know he's a part of a great offense. He's got an incredible quarterback, so he could find the end zone any given week. And if he does find the end zone this week, as his previous stats will tell you, this will look like a bad call. But I just don't get ranking a wide receiver inside the top 30 that hasn't even finished inside the top 40 on the weeks that he doesn't score. So at wide receiver 29 in the ECR, Keenan Allen's going to be a pass for me this week.
Drew, do you see this as, remember last week we both took Buffalo Bills. You took Khalil Shakir and I took Dalton Kincaid on a pass. And you said one of us is going to be right and one of us is going to be wrong, and that was me. You were right and you nailed that. So my question to you is this another situation you think with Mike Kamani Vidal prediction and your Keenan Allen? Is one of us going to be right, one of us going to be wrong, or do you think we have a greater chance at this week at both of us being right?
No, I think this week we can both hit, because they are a tough run defense, and so I do think that they can swallow up Vidal, especially if he's splitting snaps with Jared Patterson. And the Chargers have such an array of weapons now that they do have the rookie tight end on top of QJ and Lab McConkey and Trey Harris and those guys, that the Chargers passing offense can still have a good game without Keenan Allen having a good game. So I think both of these can end up hitting despite us choosing two players from the same offense to have a bad game. I think it can still work out this time.
Mm-hmm. I think it's just kind of an embarrassment of riches that somebody's talented as Trey Harris is what, their fifth or sixth option in that passing offense.
Yeah.
That's kind of crazy. But if you're going to look at guys who you want to just go ahead and pick them up and plug them into a lineup this week, and you want to do it fast, quick, maybe even in 6 rounds, why not do it with our friends at Fast Draft, where the season is heated up, we are in full throat, full swing, and they have you hooked up with some new games. That Flex 6 Frenzy, 10 teams, 6-round game, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. 6-round, 20-second clock. Pick your best in PPR scoring on the Sunday's slate and profit, or the Quick 6 Super Slam, where you're just picking 6 guys for the Sunday games. No salary cap, no problem. Pick your best 6 and make it happen over at Fast Draft. So, Jamie mentioning that Trey Harris is being used more as a blocker because he has that dog in him. So, Drew, it's a perfect time before we talk about the trade deadline and reacting to week 9. Let's get to our listeners, our watchers now who are with us live. Let's hit some questions because I know we got a lot of them stacked up in the chat.
Yeah, we got some good questions stacked up, so we'll rapid fire some of these. We appreciate you guys dropping these in the chat. Hopefully, those of you that dropped them toward the beginning of the show are still here with us. So we'll start here. I have Stafford, Justin Fields, Puka, Chase, AJ, Pitts, Ertz, and Ingram. Should I go get Kyron if possible? So I guess something to keep in mind with this is that means that on a weekly basis, you could be starting Stafford, Puka, and Kyron. But without knowing who your other running backs are, I think it's a tough question to answer because we don't really know what the need is. But so I guess I'll frame it this way. Do you guys, with the splits that you've seen between Kyron and Blake Corum, do you guys still feel good about Kyron rest of season? So Kyle, I'll pass it to you. What are your feelings for Kyron rest of season? Is this somebody you're looking to trade for?
I mean, yeah, I still like Kyron Williams. I mean, he's still going to be the majority of the running back there in the shares. Like, yeah, Blake Corum's getting a little bit more involved, but I don't see him taking more than 40% of his. I mean, I still think it'd be about 60-40. Drew, as the Rams fan, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's a fair number. It seems like last week they basically were just like rotating drives almost, but Kyron did still edge him out in terms of snaps and still seems to be the lead guy. So I think he's still like a low end RB1, high end RB2 on a weekly basis, which you can always use in your fantasy lineup.
Absolutely.
So if you don't have a problem with being that invested into the Rams offense, which there probably aren't many offenses in the NFL right now that you would be more comfortable starting 3 players from than the Rams. So yeah, I don't mind that at all. I don't think that I don't think Kyron is a bad trade target at all. All right, sober thoughts. Would y'all trade away Addison? And so dynasty question here. Would you trade away Addison and a late 27 first for T. Higgins and Chase Brown? Nate, we'll throw this one to you.
Yeah. Any update on T. Higgins right now? I know he came down hard on his upper body on that one catch. I doubt it's long term, and this is obviously a dynasty type question. So, do I think
you do get both?
T. Higgins cleared the concussion protocol, so he should play this week. So, should be good to go.
Yeah, I mean, I probably, I'm a huge Chase Brown fan, and I love what I've seen as of late, and I like T. Higgins, but I will say, last week was a good showing from JJ. Gave me optimism. Obviously, it was. It doesn't mean that I'm going to equate Jordan Addison to T. Higgins as far as apples to apples, but I probably would keep Addison and the first. And I'm the last. And I'll be honest, I'm probably the last dynasty question answerer person that you want to go, because I don't do a good job of evaluating of draft picks, because I'm always in a win now type format. It probably can cost me, but I think I would hold Addison in the 27th myself.
Yeah, and to that point, I think if you are a contender like Nate tries to build his teams to be, if you are wanting to go all in, I think that this is a fine trade to make. If you feel confident that your team is going to be in the running for a championship the next couple of years, I think a trade you can make. But to Nate's point, I don't think you have to.
I would rather trade a 26 first if I had that, because I like the 27.
Yeah, the 27 class
so
is really good.
Much better.
That is a very good point. Yeah.
Yeah. My guess is he probably put the 27 first in here because he probably already traded his 26 first, because he's like you and I and doesn't have any picks.
But if that's not the case, sober thoughts, try the 26 first if you can.
Yeah, most dynasty managers prefer, unless they are just like super in tune with the draft classes and things like that. Most fantasy managers want the earlier, the picks that come sooner anyway. All right, Ben, if I have James Cook and he were to miss, should I start Kenneth Walker or Buffalo's backup running back? So I guess that would, depending on who you pick up, that would be Ty Johnson or Ray Davis. So Rhett, if you were Ben here and you had James Cook and he ends up missing, would you put Ken Walker in that slot, or would you pick up Ray Davis or Ty Johnson and play one of them?
God, that's a tough question, because I would expect the drop off with the way James Cook has played over the past 2 seasons to either Ray Davis or Ty Johnson to be very noticeable, to say the least. I mean, because James Cook is, 5.6 yards per carry, like just touchdown machine still. I think he has 7 this season. He's been tremendous. But by the same token, Kenneth Walker hasn't quite lived up to what he was expected to be this year. Part of that has just been the fact that passing game has just been phenomenal. Part of it has been a Zach Charbonnet problem. I just think there's some uncertainty in that backfield. So, God, I don't know. Like, my gut says Walker, simply because there's more upside there if he does happen to have a good week. And I think that's one of these things where, if I'm being honest, I think I'm going to say Walker for the upside, because on a bad week, you're probably expecting Ken Walker to be in that 40 to 60-yard range with a few catches. I'm not sure that Ray Davis or Ty Johnson isn't doing something similar, so I would take Kenneth Walker based on upside.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I'll end up if James Cook does miss, I will very likely have Kenneth Walker above both Buffalo running backs, because I do think it'll be a mix. So I would go with Walker.
Although I do agree with both of you, it's pretty tempting to get the running back there against the Miami Dolphins. I mentioned how
it is.
They are. But you gotta be smart. You gotta be safe here. And yes, Kenneth Walker is probably the correct advice that we could give.
We saw Kenneth Walker actually get red zone touches this past
Yeah,
week, which is a
couple weeks
positive.
now.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
improving.
So, yeah,
Yeah, that usage is improving, which finally.
I know. So it is. I think it's not only Rhett, you were saying the upside. I think his floor is just absolutely so much safer than either one of the two backs. So I mean, it's a dichotomy of positives. The floor's higher, the upside's higher, but Miami sucks so bad that don't be shocked if people listening that don't have to make this decision. Yes, if you can grab Ray Davis or Ty Johnson and have one of those available to throw in this week, I think both are capable of having a solid flex floor.
And I'm not opposed.
One of those running backs are going to be productive for fantasy. Good luck figuring out which one, because I mean, Ty Johnson has been more so like the pass catching back, but there's no way to know without James Cook if he takes on a larger rushing role. But then like last year, whenever you look at the games James Cook missed, Ray Davis just slotted right in and handled a lot of that rushing work. But his role has been little to nothing the entire year with Cook healthy. So it's hard to know if he just immediately steps right back into that rushing role and Ty Johnson holds his same role, or does Ty Johnson just get an overall usage bump with James Cook out? Yeah. Like that's the part that makes it difficult, is you're trying to play a guessing game of how do you think that breaks out. And so if you have a strong feeling of like, I truly believe that if James Cook misses out, Ray Davis steps in and he handles, 70% of the rushing attempts. At that point, that's probably worth starting over Ken Walker, given the fact that you get to play against Miami. But how confident do you feel that that's going to be the case? Or I feel like Ty Johnson is going to be the guy with James Cook out. That might be a better start than Ken Walker if that ends up being the case. But it's just, how confident are you that that's going to be the case is the guessing game you're trying to figure out.
And you're probably looking at a split anyway, and they both kind of split. So take the better running back in this situation. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. Michael, full PPR. I need one receiver, one flex out of these three: Woody Marks, Troy Franklin, Parker Washington. Full PPR. I'm going to two receivers personally. I'm taking Troy Franklin, Parker Washington. Any disagreements there?
No, that matchup for Marks is brutal.
Yeah, I agree.
That too. Okay. Should I trade Derrick Henry for Dobbins and AJ Brown? Alex asked. So
interesting.
PPR. So Kyle, I'll throw this one to you to start off with. Would you trade Derrick Henry for a package of J.K. Dobbins and AJ Brown in full PPR?
Yeah, I think I would. Especially, I always like it if I can get two really strong pieces or two good pieces in the situation for my fantasy team, and I just got to give up one great piece. They always say, oh, the best player, wins the trade or whatever. But you know what? If this makes your roster better, Alex, I like it. You get Dobbins and AJ Brown. If you need that help, go for it. I like it.
All right. Some more Parker Washington, which it makes sense that he's a common question, because not only was he like the waiver wire darling for this week, his value also took a little bit of a question mark with a trade that we'll talk about later. So it makes sense why there's a lot of questions about what to do with Parker Washington this week. But we'll ask Parker Washington or Tez Johnson full PPR. So it's a two-parter here, but we'll start with that first one. So Nate, Parker Washington or Tez Johnson full PPR?
I really like both. Actually, there's like Kings Classic. I'm starting both of them in a league, which isn't the normal league, but I'm going Parker Washington. Like I said earlier, BTJ news is not promising. On the flip side, in the idea, and we don't know exactly what Chris Godwin's situation is going to be, but addition by subtraction in Jacksonville, subtraction by addition in Tampa Bay means that I'll probably lean the Jacksonville and Parker Washington side.
Yeah, I literally have these guys back to back. I've got Parker Washington, wide receiver 35, Tez Johnson, wide receiver 36. So I would agree that I would go Parker Washington, but it's very, very close. And then pick two: David Montgomery, Woody Marks, Kyle Monungai, or Swift. And Swift was quoted today saying he was going to play this week. Now, that is not an official declaration that he's going to play. That ultimately will depend on the coaching staff, but Swift seems to believe that he will play. So as far as pick two goes, Rhett, I'll throw this one up to you. Between these running backs here, David Montgomery, Woody Marks, or the Chicago running backs, which I guess it's easier to say, which running back are you leaving out?
Okay. I'm going to go Monty for sure. And I was hoping to get some comment on guy talk tonight to simply make this point because I have DeAndre Swift as a fade this week. Common on guy is coming off of a career game last week. And when you see a guy have that sort of game, it's the good old toothpaste tube corollary. Once the toothpaste is out of the tube, can you really stuff it back into the tube the way you did before?
Right.
No, not really. So, I mean, they know what they have. This is a dangerous spot for DeAndre Swift owners because if Monangai continues to perform, and when he has had significant looks, he's performed this season. If this gets to be a 50-50 timeshare, Swift owners are screwed and Monangai owners are laughing their way to the bank because they've already won. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't argue that.
All right. Trade Bucky and Olave to get Lamb. My running backs are Javonte, Tracy, Henderson, and Bucky. My wide receivers are Puka, Olave, BTJ, and Godwin. I'm 7-2. You're saying no. I say yes. I would do that. I would trade Bucky and Olave to get Lamb.
Do you want an Avengers room?
Bucky already isn't practicing to start this week, and they're coming off the bye. Even coming out of the bye, he's still not healthy enough to practice to start the week. So you're probably going to be without Bucky again this week. CeeDee Lamb is just such an upgrade, and you don't necessarily need CeeDee Lamb whenever you have Puka, but if you can have Puka and CeeDee Lamb, you've got Javonte, but I think you can piece your running back. I would rather be trying to piece together my running back 2 than my wide receiver 2. And so
fair. Okay.
Whenever I'm 7-2, this is the type of trade I like to make, where I like to turn 2 solid pieces into an elite piece. And so
no, you're right. You're right.
That's the route that I would go personally, but I get not wanting to do it because whenever Bucky comes back, he's probably going to be a really solid fantasy asset. But CD's just like a game-changing piece.
These are infinity zones.
Right.
This is kind of one of my phrases that I've begun to kind of use where game changers, guys that can just absolutely wreck things if you're playing them on a weekly basis. Puka Nacua is one of those guys. JSN is one of those guys. Jonathan Taylor is one of those guys. Those guys who you can plug and play and know that you have a better chance than not of having a 15-point week at minimum. These are Infinity Stone players in my mind. So, yeah, if you're 7-2, Javonte Williams has been very good. Trevion Henderson kind of been emerging. Teasing that he might break out, but we're not quite there yet. But, yeah, adding CeeDee Lamb, Puka Nacua, I think is a good spot, yeah.
Yeah, I can't argue that either.
All right. Gamer Girl, CeeDee Lamb, Brees, and Baker for Saquon in London. I don't need Baker, and I think that's a good thing to add into that. That if this is a 1-quarterback league, Baker really you can, if Baker can help get the trade done, it's fine putting him in there. But to your point, Baker really in a 1-quarterback league, Baker's like a back-end QB1. So it's not a needle mover necessarily. So you are really just looking at CeeDee Lamb and Brees Hall or Saquon and London. So Kyle, I'll throw this one over to you. CeeDee Lamb and Brees or Saquon in London? What side of the deal would you prefer on that one?
Yeah, I was looking at it and I kept going back and forth. What do I want to do? Because he's probably going to toss it to me. And I think I ultimately landed on Saquon in London. I love CeeDee Lamb. I like Brees Hall, but there's really not much of a difference. There's not, like right now, Drake London's playing so well. There's not really a big drop off between London and Lamb right now. And you get miles better running back, in my opinion, with Saquon Barkley, even though it hasn't really translated yet. But, I think it might be coming for him in the Eagles offense. So ultimately, I would go ahead and make it for Saquon in London. It's tough.
It is tough. I agree. Little start sit here. Start Mark Andrews or Colston Loveland, both tight ends coming off of great games last week. Nate, do you have a preference here between these two tight ends for 4K towing?
I'm gonna go the safer. Shockingly, I think Colston Loveland's a safer pick. Still, as good of a game as Mark Andrews had, the actual just like route share and snap percentage stays consistently low, and he's doing a lot with a little, a la like Dalton Kincaid, but who we had talked about and I've talked about, that I was a little concerned with the snap share, but he's the most efficient Dalton Kincaid has been. I don't think the exact same week in, week out for Andrews, especially by comparison to Colson Leveland, really showed what they invested that heavy draft capital in this past week. He looked phenomenal.
And it's fair to say, Nate, that don't be fooled by Mark Andrews. You know, he had 2 touchdowns, but he also only had 2 catches in that game for 22 yards. So, so I do like your call there on Loveland maybe being the better play there. The targets and the volume.
Mm-hmm. Sticking with Colston Loveland, since we're on that theme right now, Colston Loveland or Harold Fannin. I have Loveland at tight end 9 for the week right now, and I have Fannin at tight end 11. So I do have Loveland slightly higher. Do any of you guys disagree? Would you guys roll with Loveland over Fannin?
Rest of season.
I missed an important piece. I was looking at my week 10 rankings. This is a rest of season question, so that does change things a little bit. So I would start Loveland this week. Rest of season, do you guys agree that Loveland is the play over Fannin, or would you prefer Fannin rest of season? Does anybody have any strong feelings on that one?
I'd flip. I'd go Fannin this week, Loveland rest of season, and here's why.
Okay.
Yeah, that Colston Loveland game was fire last week. But before last week, what have we really seen out of Colston Loveland this season?
At least behind Komet, yeah.
Yeah, there's not been a lot there. So the way I'm wired in fantasy is I'm a wait and see guy. So like, I love the fact that Colston Loveland had that game. Let's see it for 2 more weeks.
So you don't think he won that job with the 7 catches, 118 yards, the score? You don't think he's earned a higher route share?
I think he's earned a higher route share, absolutely. But I just want to see consistency. What's wrong with wanting to see consistency out of a guy before I put him in a lineup on a week-to-week basis? Like, I started starting Aranda Gadsden after the 100-something yard game, yes, but that was also because my tight end room sucked. Like, Zach Ertz has been dog water all season. Pat Freiermuth has been terrible. I mean, so like, it was kind of a spot where I had to rely on Gadsden in that situation because he's the only guy that has shown some actual upside. If you've got another guy, which you have in Harold Fannin, why not just monitor the Loveland situation a little bit? Just kind of wait it out. If you're wrong for 1 week, if you're wrong for this week, fine. You're not going to make or break your season on 1 week. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's just that Harold Fannin's not really doing anything either, though, to make you excited about, is he?
Not really. No, he's shown flashes for sure, but I think that I would lean toward the guy that he's in a better offense with a better quarterback. And his team invested higher draft capital in him to be an impact player in the offense. And we, there's not so much necessarily with tight ends, more so with receivers, but we have seen it with tight ends recently too, that these rookies with high draft capital do tend to spike in the second half of their rookie seasons. And so it's not that hard to paint a picture where that happens for Loveland too. And so I think I would lean Loveland in both this week and rest of season personally. All right. 27th first for Kyron. I threw the last dynasty question to Nate. So Kyle, I'll throw this one to you. Maybe you have a different philosophy than Nate and I. Would you sell a 27th first for Kyle? And I'm going to phrase this question assuming that our friend here is a contender and is looking to compete for a championship this year, because I think that's the only way that you're trading away a first round pick for a running back is if you're a clear contender. So if you're contending for a championship, would you move a 27 first for Kyron?
Man, I still don't think I would do it. I'm a sucker for picks though. And like Nate said, that 27 draft is really nice. The 26 isn't as nice. I get, wanting to compete for a championship, but like maybe you can still win without Kyron Williams. I mean, he's 25 years old, so you're trading a first round pick. Realistically, you're only going to get 2 more years out of Kyron. I'd rather try to win without him and save that 27 first and maybe get the next Kyron Williams in 2027.
Yeah, it's win now versus sustainability. Dynasty sustainability matters. That age apex is going to sneak up on Kyron pretty quick. He's a smaller guy. Blake Corum is kind of emerging.
Yeah,
we talked about that earlier. I mean, that 27 is just too valuable. If you are absolutely in desperate need of a running back, sure, and then figure out the 27 draft situation later. But my initial read is no, keep the pick.
Drew, is it a sweep? Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. And I'm usually the first one to tell you sell those picks to go for it. But a 27 first for it. I know that Kyron has been solid, but it just wouldn't set right with me to trade a 27 first for a day 3 running back whose snaps are trending in the wrong direction, not the right direction. And so I think you can get more bang for your buck if you are looking to move a 27 first and than Kyron. I would be setting my sights a little bit higher if I am going to sell that 27 first round pick. So,
and if you don't win after doing that, you're going to be beating yourself up in 2027.
Yeah. That's it.
Yeah, kind of like, whenever you trade your 2026 first round pick for Bucky Irving and during championship week to try to beat Nate Markham in the fantasy championship of your fantasy and frames dynasty league, and then you still lose anyway. I can tell you, it doesn't feel great the next year. Doesn't feel great. I can speak from experience in that aspect. So, dynasty question here from our boy Jamie: Kenneth Walker or Scatterbo in a rebuild?
For me, it's Scatterbo.
Yeah,
I think they're very similar dynasty assets, but if you're in a rebuild, it all kind of depends on how your league's structured, I guess. But Scatterbo obviously isn't going to help you win games this year. He's not going to add points to your total overall points scored. So no matter how you slice it, he is going to help your draft slot more than Kenneth Walker will. Kenneth Walker is still going to be playing this year. He's going to be productive for your team with it, which if you're in a rebuild, you want your team to, not be as productive. So if guys are in like similar tiers for me in Dynasty, and I know one guy's missing the season, and I don't have to worry about him messing up a draft slot, that's the way that I tend to lean. So I would agree with you guys on that one. Alpha Gator, I have solid running backs, including Bucky, but limited receivers. Would you drop Rashad White for Rashid Shaheed? So he has Bucky, but he's considering dropping Bucky's handcuff, which with how involved Sean Tucker was last time, I'm not sure how much of a direct handcuff he even is anymore.
Mm-hmm.
This was a guy we were going to talk about anyway, as far as the trade deadline goes, things like that. Rashid Shaheed ended up moving from New Orleans to Seattle, reunited with his offensive coordinator from last year and Clint Kubiak this year. Should slot in immediately as a wide receiver next to JSN in this offense. So if you're struggling at receiver, do you think it makes sense to drop Rashad White for Rashid Shaheed? And Rhett, with you being so familiar with Kubiak and Shaheed both, what would you do in this scenario? Because I know you've also been a Rashad White guy in the past.
If they don't offer direct value, handcuffs are roster cloggers. And with Sean Tucker being a guy who can possibly be that handcuff, we don't know who the real handcuff is. I'm going with Rashid Shaheed for this simple situation. Did anybody remember when that Saints offense was healthy last year in the Scott Fish Bowl that Rashid Shaheed was the number 1 player overall in Scott Fish Bowl when the Saints were healthy toward the beginning of the season last year?
Mm-hmm.
If you remember that detail, then you know what Rashid Shaheed can do at this Clint Kubiak offense. I was talking to a fellow Saints fan, good friend of mine. My comment to him was this: I wish the New Orleans Saints would team build like the Seattle Seahawks do, because number one, Shaheed knows the Kubiak offense, but number two, he's just such an excellent complement to what JSN does that it's going to be hard for him to not have value. in the Seattle offense going forward. So, yeah, 100%, I would do that.
Yeah, I agree. And then Ingram, Pitts, Ertz, rest of season. This one is pretty easily Kyle Pitts for me.
Kyle Pitts, baby, we're so back.
If there's ever a chance that I get to answer Kyle Pitts, I'm going to take it. But I mean, in all seriousness, he has been he's second among Falcons pass catchers in target share behind Drake London. It's not Darnell Mooney. Kyle Pitts has been the second option in this Falcons passing offense. And
I want to say it's been something like 28 targets the last 3 weeks for Kyle Pitts.
Something along those lines. Yeah, and he's like right at a 20% target share on the season, which for a back-end tight end one is a pretty solid target share. We talk about all the time that if you're not going to have the elite of the elites, you want a tight end that has a pretty clear path to being a top 2 target option in their offense. And I would say, Pitts has probably the easiest path to that and has shown it over the course of the year. So any Nate, Kyle, any disagreements with you guys? Would you guys lean Ingram or Ertz over Pitts?
I would have been able to make an argument for Zach Ertz had Jaden Daniels been around, but now that he is right. So now that he is not going to be there, I can't make the case for Ertz with Marcus Mariota. He just doesn't throw the ball.
And while we're at it, more on the Kyle Pitts, Zach Ertz thoughts in tomorrow's Plays and Fades article on fantasyandframes.com.
There you go. Make sure to check out.
They're both mentioned in there.
Whenever it drops, you'll be able to get a little bit more into that. Before we get out of here, Jorge, hopefully you're still here with us. Just tuning in now. What the fuck did Kyle do to his face? I was hoping somebody would react to that live.
Wait,
and it was him.
It was Kyle.
The opening of the show.
Who the hell is Kyle?
I actually forgot that this was even on my face. I totally forgot that. I got so in tune with you guys.
Who the hell is Kyle? Because all I see is Jackson Dart co-hosting the show tonight. That's all I see.
Jorge did get there on his own in the comments a little bit later on. I have no idea what Anakin Skywalker has to do with it because I don't watch Star Trek. But
whoa, time out!
Did you do that on purpose?
I did.
Okay.
I don't watch Star Wars either, in all seriousness. But I know that gets the people going. But Jorge, make sure you go back to the start of the show and you can see the full picture of what Kyle cooked up. Jorge. But I was hoping somebody would react to the face paint live in the middle of the show without seeing the start. So thank you for that, Jorge. All right, and then should I trade Ginty and Olave for Rome and Judkins? 5-4 likely to make the playoffs. So Ginty,
Olave.
Man, that's
a pretty fair trade.
It is. The Browns and the Raiders both have very favorable schedules for the running back room rest of season. So Judkins and Ginty, they both have pretty good layouts rest of season. Then we're talking about Olave or Odunze.
Well, here's where I am. I prefer Odunze to Olave. And I think I prefer Ginty over Judkins because doing some Judkins research, Judkins has low-key kind of been a plotter this year. His breakaway run rate is solid, yet he also averages only 4.1 yards per carry, which Ashton Ginty plays behind that terrible Raiders line, so it's kind of a catch-22. It's just a matter of what's your risk tolerance, because I think Judkins is probably the quote-unquote safer play right now, but we all know what Ashton Ginty can be, so it's interesting.
I'll say, though, with Quinshon Judkins, though, his fantasy matchups there, weeks 14, 15, 16 are sweet. They get my Titans week 14, Chicago week 15, Buffalo, they've been run on too in week 16. Now, the fantasy championship is in week 17 against the Pittsburgh Steelers that we talked about earlier might be a tough matchup, but hey, 14 to 16 is a very nice stretch when you're 5-4.
You got to get to the championship for that week 17 matchup to even matter. So
exactly, yeah, true.
I think that Ginty and Judkins are pretty close to a wash rest of season, and then at that point, I prefer Odunze over Olave. So I think I would go with the Odunze Judkins side, but it is close. Before we close things out, we have a question for Nate from our friend Jamie. Nate, how's the Kings Classic League going? I bet you're at the top, right? So fill us in on how your Kings Classic experience has been this year before we get out of here.
I'm doing okay. I'm pacing for at least the playoffs or right at it in both. The team's not that great as far as like if you look at the total points scored. I've had some lucky weeks. I've also had some unlucky weeks where I should had I made one week where I started Herbert or Dak over Herbert, and then the next week it would be Herbert over Dak, and I would do the wrong picks there. But I will say I've been a week or two ahead on a lot of players that I've needed to stay afloat. The Parker Washingtons of the world, the Tez Johnsons, Devin Singletary this past week. And if you're asking this question, if you're listening, going, what the fuck is this guy talking about? Bragging about Parker Washington, Tez Johnson. But when it's in a 14-team league with 3 flex spots against 13 of the smartest people that I've been in a league with outside of you 3, of course, and our listener league, it definitely makes if you get a week ahead of one of those guys, it feels like an extra special little pickup. So definitely, here, I'm not bragging. I knew I could hold my own, but at the same time, it's still week in, week out. We'll see. I appreciate you asking about that, Jamie. It was great, playing in this league again. As always, it's an honor. So I hope to do you guys all proud and maybe at some point have a Kings Classic championship belt behind me that I would display. I would probably wear it like the badge of honor, like Jackson Dart's face paint down there in the corner every single week. You guys would probably see it.
Real quick.
All right, I think we are. I think we're all caught up on questions. I know we were planning on reacting to the trade deadline, but to be honest with you, just kind of through general conversation and great questions, we pretty much have gotten to react to most of the trade deadline news.
Yeah.
So.
Best watchers and listeners on the planet, guys. I mean, fantastic questions. You 3, always a blast to chop it up every week. Guys, this level of analysis doesn't just happen here Wednesday night. It happens throughout the Fantasy and Frames community. Whether you go to the website, whether you're watching a pregame show on Sunday, whether you're watching Shoot the Gap, whether you're watching any of the shows we might have on the network, you're going to get the same high level on a show-to-show basis. So if you're looking for that, I mean, check out Net in the pregame show on Sunday. I mean, they go through all the games. They talk about them. It's good stuff there. Plays and fades on both the IDP and just regular positional guys dropping this week on Fantasy and Frames. Just a lot of things that can give you an edge when it comes to trying to win your leagues. Now that we're in that crunch time of the fantasy football regular seasons.
And Moggs, we saw you in the chat. You were helping us out tonight. You were keeping us afloat. You were answering some questions in the chat as they came through, providing us some additional support. And so, as first and foremost, we appreciate you hanging out and tuning in with us. But we also appreciate you providing the listeners with some knowledge in the comments and, helping them out with some of them questions before we could get to them too. So appreciate you, Moggs, as always, for hanging out with us, man.
For sure.
And yeah, guys, I mean, as always, thank you guys for coming in and taking your time to talk ball on Wednesday night. It's always a blast having you guys together. Loving the gangs all together. Even when you're here with us, Aiden, we even enjoy having you here too, bud. So, guys, as for now, we're gonna get out of here. You guys know where to find us. Me are at RManU Sports on X, at Nate Markham, at Drew3MR, and at KZ1180. And of course, we'll be back next Wednesday for our Week 11 edition of our Smash or Pass Plays. For Nate, for Kyle, for Drew, I'm Rhett. We are Fourth and Frames. Toodles.